Now, at this point in time, I want to cross over to our sister station, that is Spice FM, where they're having a sit-down and interview with a member of Parliament, East African Legislative Assembly, Yala, Suleiman Shabal, and they're talking about Kenya's political options after mass protests. I'll see you again at 10 a.m. But remember, every morning, the sun rises with healing on its wings. I hope you get your portion.
Continue. Mweshimiwa, and even as they do, there's still the push where folks are saying, agreeing with you in part, where they're saying systems must change, but they're also saying individuals must go.
Of course, individuals must go. I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, we have had some people in government that have no business being anywhere close to government. Okay, and to a large extent, we as a community, as a country, as a people, allowed this, starting from the churches and the mosque. Okay, I mean, the church and the mosque were quite happy to get money from whoever was willing to bring it. Nobody once stopped and said, excuse me, hii pesa litoa wapi? Okay, now after the horse has run away, has bolted, is people are saying, oh, wait a minute, maybe it was not such a, come on, man, you knew that from the beginning. The church and the mosque tolerated this. Even you gentlemen and ladies in the press, you are also guilty by omission, because you kept quiet when a number of despicable people in this country got elected into very serious positions. We had governors who we all knew are thieves, got elected and nobody said a word. In fact, they went and voted. The people are also guilty, because, you know, when you go and vote for somebody who you know is a criminal, and you happily go and vote for them, or you appoint him, you elect him as governor, he does nothing for 5 years, and you still happily go and sing and dance to his next re-election. What do you expect? So we, the people who are today screaming loudly, are also responsible for that.
But then I think there's a place where you can claw back from that, isn't it? And you say, okay, look, and I think all of those things chalk up where you say, fine, if in the past we've made decisions whereby people are put in positions of leadership where they've done all of nothing or have basically robbed the country blind, that we can say, well, look, eyes are open, scales have fallen off, and we're saying at this point they must go, the system must change. And there have been calls for somebody who is going to lead the charge. Am I hearing you say that right now, in the position in which he's been granted a golden opportunity, two things can happen with the president, that he can change his mindset and he can also change the course of things in the country?
I think this president has an opportunity, if he seizes this opportunity, to dramatically change this country, if he chooses to change this country. Number one, let's go back to the Constitution. Chapter 6 of the Constitution was taken up, torn into pieces, shred, and put into the dustbin. The Constitution is a statement of intent. I want to be happy, but you then have to redefine it. Now, we set very clear parameters. The people of Kenya decided what sort of leadership they wanted. They set up a code of ethics and integrity that was not followed. Now, I'm saying again, this is an opportunity. You see, you can change a country by three things: public participation, transparency, and accountability. Now, public participation has always been a controlled thing, but now is the time that the Gen Z have forced and started using the internet. Let us make that public participation nationwide. Let us hear their voices loud and clear when this government is going wrong, when it is going wrong, not after it has gone wrong. And we're not talking about just this government, we're talking about the future. So if the youth have finally started getting involved, the next question to them is, how are you going to make sure that we hold this government and the next government continuously accountable? The transparency that we're looking for.
I'd like to know what you think about that. I think that there's certain things that the executive can do today. First of all, when we look at the budgets and way budgets are made for this country, the bulk of the amounts that come in goes out towards debt repayment. And it is becoming clearer and clearer that the amount of debt that Kenya owes can't see where it went because it was borrowed for development expenditure. You can't see where that has gone. One of the cries is for a public debt audit. Audit the public debt and find out exactly where this money went, because when you don't have the money to pay, you go back to the backs of Kenyans in taxes and ask them to bring this money so that you can pay the debt. If Kenyans cannot see where this money has gone, then there's a problem. And Kenyans can say, we don't owe this money. Public debt is one thing that's being asked for, an audit of that. The thing that you talked about, transparency, falls along these lines at the same time. There are certain things that the movement is asking the government of the day to do today, even before you appoint a new cabinet, even before you now start saying, let's recall this, that, or the other person. There are certain things that can be done today, but there seems to be no appetite to actually have those things done, because once you do it, the emperor loses his clothes. So how do you convince, apart from what Gen Z is saying, of us going into the streets until you do it? How do you convince other than that? How do you insist other than going into the streets? Revolution is won on the streets. Government is made in the boardrooms. How do you do it?
Let me just say this. Consider for a single second, going onto the streets was exactly not the beginning or the manifestation of the protest. The protest took place in their minds and in their communication and in their understanding. Going to the streets was just now a manifestation of all this. Mm-hmm. And everything that I've seen about this protest tells me that it is meticulously planned and they are clear about what they want, mm-hmm. and they've even staged it. From this, we go to this. From this, we go to this. And this is how we go about it. To understand it, you only need to look at Nairobi and how a protest is called because a previous protest was marred by thugs and hooligans who simply rained mayhem. It's called, but there is, people don't go. In my mind, it is clear that it's been communicated, let's not do this today because we have a problem. It's not the government banned the protests.
No.
Those who would have protested have said, we are not going to do this. Now, why am I making this statement? You said certain things, if they happened, the emperor may be seen to be naked. The emperor is already naked.
This is what I'm talking about from the emperor's point of view, that the certain demands that are being made today, the emperor does not want to open up because they will be at the doormouth of blame.
This emperor is a bold emperor. Why I say this is, when somebody is willing to sack a parliament that they appointed, okay?
Cabinet, yeah.
Cabinet, there's a parliament.
It's a parliament, cabinet, yeah.
It's a Freudian slip, but the parliament also fits into that bill.
Indeed,
okay?
It does.
Yes. All I'm saying is, and this is where I think Mheshimiwa wants to come in, because it's what he's been saying, that look, steps have been taken, we can see we've begun the forward march towards change. But Mheshimiwa, I hand it over to you.
No, you're completely right. You see, let's start with debt. The debt problem did not start yesterday. I mean, I grew up as a kid in Jomo Kenyatta's time. City, you and I are dinosaurs.
We are Cro-Magnons, yes.
But I remember very clearly the president announcing, na leo tumepawa mkopo na sijui serikali ya nani, and we would all clap like it's a fantastic thing that's just happened to us. Okay? So Jomo Kenyatta borrowed money. Kibaki was a little bit more cautious. Moi borrowed money. Uhuru went on a spending spree. It's not the individual. That's what I'm talking about. It's not who is the current president in power and whether we trust them enough to manage this debt. The question is the accountability of how the debt is used must be scrutinized. There must be transparency. There must be more sharp focus on that, which is what Gen Z, the question should be, yes, we already have a debt problem. We know that. The question is going forward into the future. How are we going to use the intellectual power of all these people who are now sharply focused on this to make sure that what happened in the past is not repeated? I'm not seeing solutions being offered. And I'm not saying that I'm the smartest man in the room, but the discussion that we need to have is we've identified the problem. A number of solutions have been proposed which haven't worked. We need to go back to the drawing table and start asking, okay, we know this is a problem. These were the proposed solutions. They didn't work. How do we solve it? Go back to the issue of corruption. Okay. Very strict, very cumbersome procurement laws. They have not worked. So what next? I'm proposing put every tender on the internet so everybody can see it. Other than defense items, there's no reason why everything cannot be on the internet so everybody can see. So the question will be, why is this parastatal buying this at such and such a price? That will be question number one. Question number two, is this really necessary? So there is no way a managing director will put on the internet his procurement attempts to procure things that are not necessary, that are ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
It's one way of reducing it. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm saying the time has come where we need to have a discussion on solutions, not a discussion on the problems that we already know exist. That's my thinking. Should there be accountability for where this money went? Absolutely.
100%.
Okay. And those who have stolen our money should be held to account. Now, the challenge we have in Kenya, and this is the truth, if you steal 10 million shillings, you go to jail.
Well,
If you steal a billion shillings, you don't go to jail because now there's enough money to share with the prosecutors, with the judges, with
even less than that,
with
if
everything.
you steal a chicken, you are on bail for 10 million shillings. You steal kilos of meat, you're on bail for 10 million shillings. But you steal billions of shillings and you're walking around the street, you can even be re-elected.
Correct.
Suleiman, I want to ask you this question. You know why?
Yes.
There's been discussion from, I read it is from religious leaders that the president should not appoint politicians. I disagree with them completely. Not just slightly, completely. You are a businessman. You are also a politician. Okay? If you are appointed to the cabinet, first of all, would you accept it? And if you, I know I'm getting it's personal, but anyway, you and I are friends, so I can ask you personal questions. And if you accepted it, how would we merge and how would we balance this? I say this because we have a country where we have people who claim to be millionaires, some billionaires, and they don't have any business, any industry that supports the wealth they have.
You know, CT, this is a very difficult question you've asked. It goes back to the same question that the nation is asking today. Should the opposition work with the government at this point in time? And there are two debates on this. Kalonzo, my good friend, has absolutely refused. He says, no. On a point of principle, I cannot. That's his point of principle.
And what principle is this?
That William Ruto should carry his own cross. And it's not our job to go and absolve him of his sins.
His mess.
Yes.
Okay.
And the minute you join him, you are basically helping him bear the cross of
the mess he has created.
The mess that has...
Yeah, according to that narrative, yes.
According to that narrative. I'm of a different view. Kenya is burning. And when a house is burning, you don't stop aside and say, I'm only a tenant. This is the problem of the landlord. I believe there is a need now for a government of national unity. And I know this is not a popular position with the Gen Z. But in times of crisis, there is a need for leadership. It would be irresponsible for the opposition to say, Apana, this is not our mess. It is our mess. Okay, and who started it? It didn't start with William Ruto. It just became worse in this administration. But it's time to go back in there and try and solve these problems, you know. And the issues that are remaining, we'll solve them in 2027. But for right now, we have to put out this fire.
The counter-argument that a lot of the movement protesters would say is that we want to have a government of national unity that is made up of individuals who have served in these positions historically or previously, coming to now solve problems in the present day that could not have been taken care of in the past.
We've had a lot of cabinet ministers who were completely useless, but we've also had a lot of cabinet ministers who were very effective and very competent. And perhaps it is time to to bring them back and use the experience. Not every former cabinet secretary deserves to go back to parliament, to cabinet. And it also does not mean that everybody who was in previous governments should not come back again. We need experienced people to try and solve these problems here. So the question isn't whether they should come back on. The question is really, we must make sure that the right people are brought back.
Let's look at...
Or not only the right people are brought back, but also new competent people are brought in.
New competent people
in the private sector today, we have a lot of very, very competent people who can be brought in to help steer the ship.
Let's look at arms of government, service that are to deal with things like corruption. And that how far, look, I mean, here we are in a year where we've probably seen the greatest number of cases that were in courts of corruption dropped. I mean, easily in 2024, we've seen more cases dropped than the last number of years combined for lack of evidence, for this, that, or the other thing. And people could chalk it up to, well, okay, fine. You have a prosecutorial body that is, again, doing things at the whims of the executive. This is what is out there. How do you fight corruption? How do you fight some of these things if the very bodies that have been set up to do some of these things are, look, very blatantly, number one, killing its own citizens when we talk about what's happening with the protests? And also then making sure that folks who have been fingered in terms of corruption are being let off the hook. These are some of the things that are also being raised today. How?
Again, you are 100% right. And this is the reason why I brought this book, Why Nations Fail. And the central thesis of this book is one very simple thing. Don't change people, change institutions. We have the right institutions, but unfortunately, those institutions have been subverted, starting first with Parliament. The minute Parliament lost its capacity to create checks and balances, that institution was subverted. The minute you create an executive that is completely, totally, 100% dominated by one man, even that institution got subverted. And the process becomes endless. So our challenge as a nation is, how do we strengthen the institutions that we set up constitutionally and make them work again? That's why I'm repeating again, let's go back to transparency. Let us force this government and every successful government and every, successive government to a level of transparency that this country has never seen before. And that's why the Gen Z, with their capacity to utilize IT, play such a critical role. I'm going back to my politics in Mombasa, where I was challenging the youth. Don't stand up on a platform and start talking about corruption. We already know. What is the solution? The challenge to the Gen Z today, okay, you've started the revolution, you've taken it to a very good position. So did Tahrir Square, the Egyptians. So did the Tunisians. So did the Yemenis. What is the end goal? How do we convert the gains that have been made into institutional changes that will change this country? I'm even throwing the challenge to the current president, that Your Excellency, he has an opportunity, a golden opportunity to change this country.
Do you think members of cabinet and those who sit in these positions should be paid less?
I think we're focusing on trivial issues.
No, I don't think it's trivial, because a lot of the wastage, and austerity issues and measures that we talk about stem from these very offices, which use huge amounts of money on a daily basis to do things that they have no business doing. And that's one of the very clear clarion calls from this movement, that there's wastage right at the office level.
The wastage is not in the salaries. The salaries, by industry standards, cabinet secretaries are not massively overpaid. I can tell you that. Okay. The issues is that government wastage is money being spent on things that are not productive for this country. When you send people on trips and you take 30 people and everybody is being paid a per diem of $1,000, and then you calculate the total cost of that trip, and it adds up to $500,000, and then you wonder, wait a minute, what did we benefit out of this $500,000 spent sending 20 people to New York? Okay, that same $500,000, had it been spent by this government or by any government building water pans, mashinani,
for drought areas,
okay, that same money being used more productively is of value to us.